our final debate of not just the semester, but the first ever year of the Edinburgh Union. So yes, welcome back to Teviot, everyone. We're in the debating hall this evening, the home of debating here at Edinburgh. So it's lovely to be back. And thank you everyone for coming. Thank you for supporting us this year. The Edinburgh Union would not have taken off this year if it were not for the lovely audience who comes and watches every fortnight. So thank you to everybody here tonight. I am just going to do a couple of thank yous before we begin. I am Lucy, by the way. I've been on the executive committee this year at the Edinburgh Union. So a big thank you firstly to the Edinburgh Political Union, who out with this year we would not have been able to function. We've been a subsidiary organisation of them this year, and they've been amazing from giving us advice and letting us be part of them. So a huge thank you to them, and a huge thank you to Grace, their president in particular, who is here with us this evening. So thank you for joining us. Secondly, a huge thank you to EUTV, who have filmed all of our debates, and again, it's been great for publicity that they've been able to come, so thank you so much for giving up your time every fortnight. Another thank you goes to USA and the entire team here at Teviot, who again have helped to facilitate this debate and have done an amazing job at the logistics. And finally, I'd like to say thank you to every single one of the committee at the Edinburgh Union this year. You know, we would not have been able to create these debates if it weren't for the hard work of every single one of you, so you should all be very proud, and we're very grateful that you've all wanted to join us this year. And finally, a big thank you to Finn and Finley, who have been on the executive committee alongside me, and especially Finn, who had this wonderful idea and the reason we're all here. So yeah, thank you very much. And chairing tonight's debate, I'm delighted to announce that we have Ewan, who is the new president of the Edinburgh Union for next year. So I will hand over to you. But yeah, thank you everyone for coming. I hope you enjoyed the debate.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Lucy. Might I say myself, it is an honour to welcome you all to the final debate of the Edinburgh Union's inaugural year. Tonight we'll be discussing whether this House believes universities have lost their true purpose. Now, the role and function of universities is under increasing scrutiny in contemporary discourse. Since their inception, universities have been regarded as centres of learning, intellectual curiosity, and the pursuit of knowledge. However, modern universities appear very different to the institutions that emerged in the 11th century. What began with just 4 disciplines being taught, that is law, theology, natural philosophy, and medicine, has expanded into hundreds of degree programs across dozens of subjects. This growth and change has brought with it new pressures. Universities must now balance financial pressures, social responsibilities, and student expectations, while also navigating an age where information is more readily accessible than ever before with AI. So tonight we ask, have universities lost their true purpose, or does it remain with them? Now, before we begin, a couple of things about how we run our debates here at the Edinburgh Union. So each speaker will be given 10 minutes to speak. Now, the first and last minute of those 10 minutes are protected time. The end of the first minute and beginning of the last will be indicated by the bell. Thank you, Tyson.
That was very loud.
Now, during the unprotected time in between this first and last minute, anyone in the hall, including speakers on either side of the motion, can make a point of information. Now, a point of information must be phrased as a question about a substantive element of the speaker's speech. If you wish to make one, please stand up, clearly put up your hand, and say point of information. It is then up to the speaker to deny or accept your point. If they accept it, you can then ask your question. If they deny it, sit back down. Sorry. Now, the time it takes for the speaker for you to make your question to the speaker will not be included in their time. However, the time it takes for the response will. Now, we have dedicated sections later on in the debate for floor speeches and for Q&A. So if one of your issues is related to this, we ask that you hold off until then. Now, finally, done, I think. Okay, so if I could now welcome the first speaker for the proposition, Finn Tyson. Finn is a 4th-year student studying history at the University of Edinburgh, and you may also recognize him as a founder and the first ever ex-president of the Edinburgh Union. Finn, you have 10 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. It is fantastic to see debate returning here to Teviot Debating Hall. When I first founded the union back in June and sent that first email to a potential speaker, I could not have imagined what it would be today. 11 debates later, we have the Chancellor of Cambridge University, the leader of the Scottish University and College Union, the former leader of the Green Party, and of course Edinburgh's own principal, here tonight to speak to you on this incredibly important debate. Now, as Lucy said, the union would not be what it is without the tireless effort of all of our committee and the amazing amount of time they've dedicated to it in its inaugural year. And I would like to thank them so much for all of their work and their belief in the motto, discussing what divides. Because in an age of echo chambers and misinformation and increasing political polarization, the physical room and human interaction matters more than ever. And whilst we are here to discuss what divides, universities across the UK seem to be entirely focused on calculating only what multiplies their profit. At this critical time, universities have forgotten their true purpose, prioritising bottom lines over supporting meaningful in-person discussions. And across the UK, universities are systematically failing their students, their staff, and the academic communities that it is their purpose to support. Now, I would like to begin with a baseline of sincerity. I love Edinburgh. The university here is fantastic. I love their history, I love the buildings, I love the people, professors and students alike, who call it home. I'm proud to be part of its lineage, and I'm incredibly proud to call it my alma mater. But Mr. President, love does not mean blindness. In fact, it is because we love our universities that we must be the first to sound the alarm when it neglects the people that are at the heart of its educating mission. Tonight, the proposition will argue that the modern university has undergone a fundamental shift. They have moved from being a community of scholars to a corporation of consumers. Their purpose has not just evolved in a competitive market, it has been forgotten in favour of the bottom lines. And there are three areas where this is most seen. The first is the myth of independent learning, which hides the erosion of the academic bond. The second is the prioritisation of commercial property and prestige over the people that make the university. And the third is the rise of the managerial class and the CEO model of leadership that has isolated itself from the university community and its intellectual mission. But before we get into all that, I am a history student, and I feel I am obliged to go back to history to find what a university's true purpose is. In 1884, the Students' Representative Council created the first ever students' union here in Edinburgh. It is their efforts which is the reason why we are standing in this hall today. And they saw, and they did what they did because of the great defect that they observed. They felt distanced from their professors, and they felt isolated from the academic community that they should have been part of. One student at its second meeting even compared the university not to a nurturing mother, an alma mater, but to a wicked stepmother, having as little to do with her students as possible and only doing what the law required. 140 years later, these sentiments can still be felt in our university. In 1884, they recognised that this isolation was counter to the true purpose of universities, which is that they should support and protect a community of scholars in the collective pursuit of the truth. Universities' purposes are not just to deliver content, or to take attendance in lectures, or to spit out graduations and graduates to an uncaring job market. Universities should fundamentally change the way we think. They should force us into new approaches, encourage us to adopt different perspectives, so that we not only know more, but we understand better. This can only be achieved in universities where the pressure of the market is second to promoting rigorous face-to-face dialogue between students and professors. And unfortunately, the opposite is true across the UK. We are told that we are entering university and that we are entering a full-time immersive intellectual experience. Yet, contact hours are becoming an endangered species. At the University of Edinburgh alone, we are told that we should spend 40 hours a week on our studies, and the university advertises that we'll have 12 to 15 contact hours a week. But speak to most humanities students. They get half that. In my first 3 years, I only had 6 contact hours a week. This year, I had 4. The university's response? They call it independent learning. Well, when 85% of your degree is spent in solitary research, the university is no longer teaching you. It is merely validating your own self-directed efforts. Mr. President, independent learning, although valuable, when taken to the extreme, is often a polite euphemism for international... Please.
Do you know what the contact hours were in 1884?
I'm afraid I don't know what the contact hours were in 1884, but I assume that they were higher, I'm afraid. My dissertation is due tomorrow at 12, so maybe I'll do some quick research and add that in. Apologies. Right. Back to where we were. Institutional neglect. When 85% of your degree is spent in solitary research. And with the rise of AI, this simply isn't good enough. Data can potentially be synthesized in moments, and arguments can be created in seconds. It is now more vital to the university's educating mission that they focus on providing in-person discussion more than independent learning. We need to build our students' ability to go out and go beyond synthesizing arguments from textbooks to verbalize and defend new ideas. Now, I'm not saying that universities don't do this to some extent. The few contact hours we have are incredibly valuable, and are spaces where discussions take place. But they are limited. And what is worse, the university's priorities mean that they are going to become more limited, as available teaching staff decreases and seminars skyrocket. And this isn't an academic choice, it is a financial one. Fewer contact hours and bigger class sizes mean that staff's valuable time is stretched further across more students. And as universities prioritize increasing revenue with tuition fees, whilst producing less value for individual students. You cannot mass produce critical thinking. Oh, I haven't got much time, I'm so sorry. You cannot mass produce critical thinking. You cannot scale deep intellectual mentorship. When you try, the formation of the mind is the first thing to be sacrificed at the altar of fiscal responsibility. And I understand that universities across Britain operate in a predatory market, and I understand that there's a particular issue here in Scotland, but universities cannot use these issues as an excuse to reduce the quality of their teaching and only see students as revenue streams rather than scholars. It is not an abstract danger. We can see it in the desperate attempt to maximise international tuition fees, whilst the number of Scottish and English students decrease. International students are, of course, incredibly important to our communities, but when a university relies on them to keep the lights on, it creates a perverse incentive. The priority is no longer who is the best fit, it is who can pay the most and how can we get them to come here. And to attract global custom, the university's financial resources, which we are led to be so small that they will not put money into staff, is placed into buildings with an 11% increase on infrastructure spending between 2024 and 2025. Walk around any major campus and you will see massive new hubs, steel innovation centres. Edinburgh alone spent £207 million on its estate while cutting back on its staff. We are spending millions on the skin of our universities while its organs are failing. Because the University of Edinburgh is potentially going to be cutting 1,800 teaching jobs. This is not merely taking away and thinking about monetary value. This is losing the value that is at the core of our university. When a university doesn't take control or doesn't protect its academic community, the community that is at its heart, that is the main driver of inspiration, of change, if it cannot protect that academic community, if it decides to prioritize buildings and infrastructure over that, then it is not creating a house, it is creating a house for education, not a home. And I urge you all to vote for the proposition.
Thank you so much for that wonderful speech, Finn. We would now like to welcome the first speaker for the opposition, Adam Jeffrey. Adam is a second-year mathematics student at the University of Edinburgh and was also a member of the Edinburgh varsity team that beat Cambridge earlier this year. Adam, you have 10 minutes, the floor is yours.
Good evening, everyone. And before I begin, thank you to the whole committee, thank you to all the guests, and thank you to all of you for coming this evening. I'd like to quickly address the elephant in the room. I'm completely out of my depth here. It doesn't take long to look along the line of speakers tonight and come to that conclusion. That being said, and I mean this with the utmost respect, aside from Finn, I'm also one of the only people speaking tonight who is currently a student, and again, with the utmost respect, one of the only people speaking tonight who has been a student in the last 20 years. If you could keep laughing, the speech isn't long enough to go the whole time. Therefore, I'm going to speak tonight about how we define the proposition, what this question means to me, and why I believe that universities have not forgotten their purpose. So have universities forgotten their purpose? Well, for this to be true, we must be able to define the purposes of university. Even at face value, this is a little bit more complicated than you might expect. It's not the same now as it was in the 1800s, or indeed as it was in the 1900s, or even as it was 10 years ago. The purpose of an academic institution changes as demographics shift and society's expectations change, as institutions themselves evolve and reassess their priorities, and most poignantly, as class and educational barriers are pushed and pulled. Even geographically, how we define higher education and its purposes differs globally. Such differences arise from the uncountable number of economic, social, political, and historical factors, and resultantly, higher education in the UK, both in its priorities and its organisation, greatly differs from its American, European, African, and Asian counterparts. We could take this a step further and say that the priorities and purposes of Scottish universities are different from English universities. And if you really wanted to go a step further, you could say that universities in urban capitals such as Edinburgh have incredibly different priorities and purposes to those run in rurally based areas. Now, I'll admit at this point, my argument is becoming a bit hand-wavy and dismissive, but we can ground it in a lived reality and common sense. For simplicity, we can designate the purposes of universities societally and individually. Societally, we expect universities to provide research and act as a touchstone for societal analysis and debate. When they can, we expect universities to rigorously clarify the facts. And when they can't, we expect them to provide a soapbox upon which we can confront the truth from a global perspective. Individually, UK universities are expected to prepare students for the job market and provide a breaking-in period for adulthood. More intangibly, they should equip young people with skills to critically analyse and problem-solve, while instilling knowledge that will empower lifelong decision-making. Looking beyond the student body, they must act as fair and equitable places of work for staff. Now, critically, I'm not saying that every university does all these things, or does them well, rather that if they have forgotten their purpose, they must categorically be rejecting and failing to carry out all of their objectives. Now, immediately, I'd like to touch upon that final point about staff, because it is there, I believe, the crux of my argument lies. It is easy to confront universities when they are faceless, unidentifiable institutions, or as figureheads, and conclude that they are out of touch with the purposes and key tenets of higher education. Contrarily, I believe that this is a very narrow and dismissive way to classify the institutions around which so many of our lives revolve. It's also dismissive of the fact that universities are incredibly complex entities that are made up of thousands of people with thousands of cogs, many of whom meaningfully inform the purposes of universities, and when considered together, are universities. And I suppose at this point, it depends on your definition of universities and which factors you think contribute to making university what it is. To me, universities are my lecturers, who I spend hours listening to, or this incredible tutor I have for my politics class. To an extent, universities is even the name I always read in a reading, and I've had to cite so many times, I'm starting to think I really personally know Merrill Kenny. It's the cleaning staff, the support and administrative staff, or those working at the library reception who always let me in when I lose my card. That's who I think of when I think of the university. And therefore I ask, do you truly believe that these people, the real cogs and bolts that hold universities together, are not cognizant of the purpose of universities, or indeed, that they've forgotten their job's purpose?
Point of information.
Yep.
I absolutely agree with your point, but I have a question. If the university management has forgotten the value that is in these people and is willing to sacrifice them in times of financial difficulty, then surely universities have forgotten their true purpose, because as you say, the true university is found in its people, and the university is letting its people down.
Yeah. I think it's at this point that our beliefs begin to homogenize. I believe that if this debate was about executive people in executive positions forgetting the purpose of their role or forgetting the purpose of universities, it's a great point. I think if we look beyond and consider universities as a broader institution, it begins to lose a little bit of clarity. I'd like to touch upon the student body. To use the University of Edinburgh as an example, there's a student population of more than 49,000 people. That's more than 8 times the size of the town I'm from. I'd posit that students, especially en masse, inform and contribute to universities, inform their purposes, and inform the experience of those associated with the institution. My university experience has been as affected by my peers as by any other variable. Indeed, the student body consistently wields the power to impact individuals, groups, and wider society. To name a few, I have a teammate who consistently volunteers to wash the kit bag every week. I have a friend who's always saved me a seat on the 4th floor of the library. What about that friend in the year above who tells you which courses to avoid? More broadly, what about the countless organizations and charity drives and volunteering that is organized by the student body? Now, I promise I won't stand here and say that the faceless entities that you might associate with universities are all holy and that they never let us or society down. But the purposes of universities, if we're ever able to tie down that intangible variable, is embodied by the institution's people who are all too aware of the importance of academia. Now, as I said at the start, my speech wasn't long enough, so I'm about to finish. And I'll end with a brief personal anecdote. To keep a long story short, I failed one of my maths exams last year and had to resit it over the summer. Revising alongside pulling 50-hour work weeks at a restaurant was a total nightmare. And to be totally candid, it was a really difficult point in my life. I felt pretty untethered from the university at this point, but for the grounding support of my student advisor, who at the time, and to this day, feels like one of the only identifiable personal links between myself and the institution. In my experience, it is such relationships and the people behind them that in a real and lived sense are the university. And I'm incredibly confident that it is these people who are all too aware of their purpose. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Adam, for that poignant speech. Edinburgh Union to welcome the second speaker, Baroness, Natalie Bennett, the former leader of the Green Party in England and Wales, now continuing as a member of the Green Party in the House of Lords. Previously working in journalism, she served as the editor of the Guardian Weekly. Baroness, it is a pleasure to have you here. You have 10 minutes. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. President, and to all of your team for inviting me to this historic occasion in such a beautiful building. Now, so everyone doesn't have to sit there wondering, yes, my accent comes from south of here. But don't mistake it from London. Yes, it is Australia. Just to be clear about that point. What's my qualifications for being here? Well, I've spent in total about 9.5 years on 2 continents. I've studied sciences, I've studied social science, and I've studied humanities. And I am now trying to work out, little book advert here, how to change everything. And changing everything, of course, involves changing our universities. And particularly the subtitle of this book is How We Can Rethink Society. And universities have to be absolutely crucial to that work of rethinking society. We have created a broken world and we have to fix it, and we don't fix it with the thinking that got us to this place in the first place. Like the first speaker for the opposition, I think we've got to think about definitions, and it mightn't surprise him to know that my definition of university is very different to his. I'm not including in the definition of university the overworked, frequently insecurely employed academics and support staff who are underpaid and really suffering at this moment, as we can see from the strike signs all around us here in Edinburgh. And I'm not talking about the students. Most of the people in this room, young, and we, my generation, I'm 60 years old, we have bequeathed to you an unstable, insecure, unhealthy world, and I'm really sorry about that. I can only apologise for it. What I'm talking about is the institutions, the model that we see in Scotland, in England, in Canada, in Australia, places that have the neoliberal marketised university at their core. They exist as a whole, directed by a few extraordinarily highly paid, managerially orientated, competition-focused few who've seized control with the active support of the political class. Yes, that is me, but it's not my politics, I promise. These are institutions of the status quo, which aim to preserve the status quo. They are creatures of the establishment, created by the establishment. They're focused on continuous growth, which is the ideology of the cancer cell. They are focused on shiny new buildings, on scooping up fees to justify even higher salaries for the few of those managers. They're producing, if they can manage it, more and more STEM graduates, most of whom will enter the financial sector with their maths-focused PhDs. And then, quite likely, those people will create the next financial instrument that will break the global financial system. They are transnational business companies who are operating in a competitive global knowledge economy. This is not what should be the true purpose of universities. Now, I want to focus a little bit in the title on the term forgotten, because there was not ever some great past golden age. Universities have generally, very often, functioned as exclusionary, extractive, elite-preserving centres of privilege. And I have to pay tribute here to the Edinburgh 7. For those of you who don't know, I'd urge you to go away and look them up. They were 7 women who forced their way into this institution, got qualified with medical degrees, then the Court of Sessions said they were not allowed to graduate or practice as doctors. That's a demonstration that universities have always had to be fought, you have to be part of the change. So that's an urge from you tonight, is be that change to everyone in this audience. You can be. Look at where we've got now. Now, we've looked a little bit at the history, going back to the 11th century in Belgium. The very start was students who created the institution they wanted. That should be the true purpose of a university, delivering what the students want. We've got great institutions now, like the Autonomous University of Barcelona. Go back to the 1960s, there was a real attempt to create a new model of a university. In London, there's a really interesting group called the New School of the Anthropocene, trying to create genuine leadership, deliver change, be really democratic, healthy knowledge from communities of scholars. Instead, we have this managerial university aiming to prepare students for maximum income potential while squeezing as many hours as possible from underpaid staff at minimum cost, searching out those overseas students so they can bring in more funds. Now, we can see that this is not working. We look around these islands and we see whole schools of study are being culled as though they were cattle in the middle of a foot-and-out-mouth pandemic. I speak of two that I happen to know about in the University of Leicester. The critical studies people in the business school, culled. In the University of Sheffield, landscape archaeology that helps us understand past changes caused by human action, caused by climate change, over many centuries, culled because they don't make enough money. The reality is, this is not the true purpose. I could stand here for 10 minutes listing all of the subject areas, the schools that are being culled. And one of the things that's really noticeable is that the majority of these are in the humanities and social sciences. Where are we today? What's the problems we're facing today? Think about the manosphere. Think about the levels of xenophobia in our society. Think about the incredibly poor levels of mental ill health. Think about the loneliness pandemic, and those two are particularly British diseases. Don't we think we need to think about the structure of society? Isn't that every bit or more crucial than talking about STEM subjects? And yet we're slashing away at these fields of study. Now, what we want to do is think about different ways of thinking. I'm going to take a little bit of time to offer 3 different ways we can go forward and talk about 3 books. And the first one of these is written by Cal Newport, Slow Productivity, which is kind of like the slow food movement, if you know about that. Do fewer things, work at a natural pace, obsess over quality. Do we think that's a true purpose of the university? I believe it should be, but what are our universities forcing our scholars to do? If you haven't read it, and I should warn you it's very depressing reading, there's a website called Retraction Watch, which shows what the product of the publish or perish drive is doing to the standard of our scholarship. My second book, I recommend this to pretty well every audience I speak to, is by David Graeber and David Wengrow, The Dawn of Everything. 300,000 years of human history, all the amazing, wonderful, different ways we have lived. And yet somehow what we have now is a university that was created by the kind of thinking that a guy called Francis Fukuyama, who wrote as the Berlin Wall was coming down, he declared the end of history. And so how people were living in the United States of the 1990s was the perfection of where we were all meant to get to. Teleologically, this was the goal. And this was the thinking that created the university that we have today. And you know what? David Graeber is one of the most brilliant thinkers of our age. Sadly, he's dead now. He could not find a place in a university. And finally, I'm going to come to the third book I want to mention, Suzanne Bosch, Quiet Methodologies, Humility in the Humanities. She says, escape the combative, extractive, colonial ways of thinking. not chasing answers but seeking questions, not seeking mastery but being comfortable in uncertainty. These are the ways we have to think in the Anthropocene, in the messed up world that we are in now. These are the ways that a true purpose university will open up for scholars and students as a community together, acknowledging that a first-year student, an 18-year-old now, who's been through the experience of the COVID pandemic, who's lived through this difficult world where we have now, has as much to contribute to thinking as anybody else. A community of scholars, that is the true purpose of a community that can find a way forward so that we can all live in a healthy way on this planet.
Now we move back again to the opposition, and we are extremely privileged to welcome the next speaker, Professor Sophia. Sophia currently serves as the 35th Principal and Vice Chancellor of the University of Edinburgh, having previously served as the Vice Chancellor of the University of Hong Kong and the Dean of Medicine and Dentistry at Bristol. Knighted in 2023 for services to higher education. It's a privilege to have you here. Sophia, you have 10 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ewan, and can I add my thanks to the organisers for the invitation, to my fellow speakers for agreeing to participate, and for all of you for being here. So I'm also going to give you my definition of the mission that we are accused of having forgotten. To me, the mission of a university centres around three pillars: the education, the research and the civic engagement. We've heard a little bit about education from some of the other speakers. I actually agree with one of the things that Finn said, which is that universities are characterised by a search for the truth. I've actually got those words in my notes, but you said them for me. I absolutely agree with that. I think actually universities are defined by creating opportunities. They create opportunities for students, for staff, and for communities. I'm an example of opportunity being created by universities. I was the first member of my family to go to university, and I'm fond of saying that everything good that's happened in my life is as a result of me being given a place at university. I'm grateful for that, and I've seen my life's mission as trying to provide those opportunities for others. The education that we offer is broad. I think four-year degrees in Scotland have distinct advantages. There's also a lot of education and experience outside the classroom. So whilst I hear the point about contact hours, I think that's an important point. Also, I believe a lot of the benefit of a university experience is from what takes place outside the classroom. The community that you're part of, often a diverse and international community. I will come to international students, but one of the things that international students contribute to a university like Edinburgh is the diversity of the community. We have fabulous facilities for sport, for both... Oh, yes. Yes, please.
You say that part of university is part of being part of the community. How can you really expect to be part of the community when we have such few contact hours? We cannot physically build those communities around us. For example, with lecturers and other students.
Thank you. I mean, I think contact hours are one aspect of community, but there's so many other aspects of community. I think what the students do as volunteers, and one of the great privileges of my life is I get to see nominations for Edinburgh Awards for people that have done amazing things in the community. So, yes, I agree that contact hours are a challenge in terms of building that community with your teachers, but I also think that students in a place like this contribute massively to their own community, to the university community, but also to the civic community around us. So the international students, as I say, diversify that diversify that experience. We've got lots of other assets to offer our student community. Our research has impact. Our research changes lives. Our research translation can create jobs, form companies.
You said that international students' presence helped diversify the campus, and I want to know how that what diversify really means when we see this rising international tuition fees was like £24,500 a year. Mine was enrolled, and like I think it now went up to £27,000 a year for undergrad, and I want to know how is
Okay, so I will come to the funding of higher education and the role that different students from different backgrounds contribute to that. I will come back to that. I was talking about the research impact, the way that research translation can create jobs, form new companies, create economic benefit for both for individuals, for families, and for nations. There are benefits also of civic engagement, benefits to the city and the region, and I could give you countless examples, but I don't have time. But there's a very good example of providing data science in schools. So every school in South East Scotland is provided with the Internet of Things by the University of Edinburgh and is collecting data which is processed by the University of Edinburgh supercomputer and then transmitted back to the schools. So that the schools are getting the opportunity to learn data science. These are primary and secondary schools. So this is an example of civic benefits. So have we lost our purpose? No, I don't believe we have. University's aim is to seek the truth. Thank you, Finn. That's my comment as well. And that's true in our teaching and in our research. If I have a concern about our modern world, it's not actually about the advance of technology. It's more about the loss of respect for that truth, with one person's truth being more important than another's, according to how loudly they shout or how many followers they have on social media. Universities like this one, and indeed like Cambridge, have been around for centuries. I think the really interesting question is why? Why have they been around for centuries? I believe there are two reasons. One is that they provide societal benefit, and so therefore societies believe in universities and want them to continue, so they support them. And secondly, I believe it's because universities have been able to adapt. Our own former student here in Edinburgh, who then subsequently went on to study in Cambridge, Charles Darwin, taught us that if you fail to adapt, you die. I'll take one more, but I probably won't take any more after that because I'll run out of time. It would take me longer than the 10 minutes I've got to address that question, but I think there's a lot of information in the public domain about where I don't believe that we are responsible for irresponsible investment decisions. But we can come back to that maybe in the Q&A. The adaptation that I referred to from Darwin is true, that the universities have been able to adapt in order to survive. One of the things that's happened in the last few years, in the 20 or so years since I was a student, thank you for that, is that universities have levelled the playing field. So when I went to university, only a small percentage of society had that opportunity. Now that percentage is much higher. Edinburgh is very good at contextual offers. We were one of the first universities to do that. We have a programme called Insights that some of you may or may not know about, which is providing opportunities for students from disadvantaged backgrounds to go and travel and meet some of our alumni somewhere in the world. We have a programme called Into University, jointly with the University of Glasgow, which provides centres in disadvantaged communities, giving young people information about what their options are later in life, including going to university, but also what other options they have. All of these things are examples of the great activities that the University of Edinburgh is carrying out. The pride of place in my year typically has been graduation ceremonies. In graduation ceremonies, and we graduate about 10,000 students per year from the University of Edinburgh, those students are going out to make the world a better place, as they have done for centuries from this place. Edinburgh is in the top 10 in the UK for graduate employment. We're ranked number 34 in the world by employer reputation. We have activities like the Education Beyond Borders scheme, which is giving opportunities to students and staff from war-torn parts of the world and providing them with sanctuary and with continuity here in Edinburgh. We have the MasterCard Foundation, which is bringing talented people from sub-Saharan Africa to study here and later on to take their experience either back to Africa or to some other part in the world. We have more accommodation than any other UK university, and I want more, and I'll come to the subject of buildings in a second. There is a commercial reality that in order to provide the experiences that the University of Edinburgh can and does want to continue doing, we have to pay the bills. There are political choices made about how universities are funded. The political choice in Scotland for Scottish students is that the Scottish Government does not believe they should pay tuition fees. So they provide funding for Scottish students. They call it free education. I don't. It's not free. It's taxpayer funded, but it's free to the student. But it's inadequately funded. We get about £2,000 a year less for a Scottish student than we do for an English student. English students largely pay tuition fees. International students, as has been cited, pay higher tuition fees. The reality of trying to keep the show on the road, pay the bills, and run an organisation of the scale of the University of Edinburgh is that we have to find £120 million per month. So the costs of paying the bills, paying the wages, running the facilities and investing in our students and staff is £120 million a month. We don't get that much money from either government. Governments are inadequately funding universities. These are political choices, and if you want the system to be different, you should be lobbying the government, not the universities. The examples of, so we're accused of seeking to make profit. That's actually one of the most fundamental misunderstandings of universities. We're a charity. We do not make profits. We don't have shareholders. We cannot make profits. What we can make is a surplus on our activities, which we can then invest in the future. So when we talk about profit, this is not profit in the business sense. This is actually surplus activity that we can reinvest. The building that we're in is a fantastic example. So this building was in poor condition. It's the oldest student union building in the world. I said I wouldn't take any more, sorry. It's the oldest student union building in the world. It's been refurbished to a very high standard, preserving some of the history, and it will be a benefit to students for decades to come. This is not a shiny building built to gratify me or leave the university in a better place in terms of the numbers of buildings it's a building that's been improved for its users, which are largely the students. Natalie mentioned the Edinburgh 7. I was going to say all the great things that your university does that you don't know about. We gave posthumous degrees to the Edinburgh 7 because they were not able to graduate in 1869, so we gave them degrees in 2019. 150 years later, we've done countless other things. Finally, I'm going to tell you about the one time in my life when I could have been persuaded to speak in favour of this motion. I've worked in universities for about 43 years. The first 30 of those I also worked in the NHS. For the past 23 years, I've been working in various leadership roles, including 12 as a university president, firstly in Hong Kong, and now for 8 years here. There's only been one time in that lengthy career when I felt that I was working for an organisation which had lost its true purpose. And that was in 2023, when UCU, represented by the next speaker, carried out their marking and assessment boycott, and students were prevented from graduating. I never thought I would see the day when staff who professed to care about students would stop them from graduating. And at that time, I did feel as if I was working for an organisation which had lost its purpose. Apart from that, I do not feel like that. I think we haven't lost our purpose. It has gotten harder to deliver that purpose in the face of inadequate funding from governments, various external events like the pandemic, various wars, the geopolitical changes, and inflation, etc. But the central purpose remains alive and well, and we and other universities across the UK are continuing to deliver. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your speech, Sophia. We will now be moving to a short break. The loft bar, I am aware, is open. You can access it through taking your left once you leave the main doors. We will be coming back and continuing the debate at 8:15 with floor speeches, so please, during the break, have a think about what you might wish to say. Thank you very much. See you at 8:15.
Sorry. It's just for the summaries. Yeah, I totally forgot. Thank you so much. Oh, I'm going to know all the intel now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for rejoining us. We will now be moving on to the floor speeches, which is the opportunity for everyone here in the hall to have their say. So the floor speeches will be 2 minutes long. If you go over, you will incur the wrath of the bell. And if you would like to just please put your hand up. And at first I would like to ask, would anyone have a floor speech they want to make in favour of the proposition? Okay, I saw a hand go straight up on the end there. In the grey. Is it Lucy?
Lucy needs a hand out.
Yeah,
Can I? Okay.
Sorry about that. Yes, I think the proposition is a really valid point. It feels like the guts of the university being ripped out when it comes to courses and it comes to teaching positions. But I also think to make this point really stand out in the context of this argument, they need to show and unequivocally prove These changes and these cuts are the result of the university losing a sense of purpose rather than, as the proposition has been arguing, it just being kind of a product of the times universities find themselves in. And I also think that, when we're considering this question, when we're considering whether universities have lost their purpose, universities are such a big entity, it's kind of hard to narrow down where it may have lost its purpose. But, we need to think of what can cause change in universities, what might have caused this change. And, students can cause change, yes. Teachers can cause change, yes, if they're in a big enough mass. This is why we see protests, because we want to see change. But really, it's the people at the top who have the driving power, who have the power to make the decisions. So when we're considering this question, I think it's just important to consider whether the people at the top of the universities have lost the true sense of purpose of universities.
Thank you very much. I should have also said, and I apologize, just when you stand, if you could say your name and your year group, that would be great. Now, would anyone like to make a floor speech in favor of the opposition? Yeah, I saw a hand shoot straight up there.
Hi, my name is Ash, and I'm the Students' Association President for this year. I'm speaking, first of all, in response to Peter. I can't say the contact hours for 1884, but in the 1850s, students had about 5 to 6 hours of contact every single day. You can see that if you go into the university archive and read some student notes there. But you also talked about Charles Darwin. And Charles Darwin came to uni here in the 1820s and actually complained about too many contact hours. You can also read that in his diaries if you want to at your leisure. But he also got taught by someone called John Edmonston. And John Edmonston was a freed slave who was never employed by this university, and students rallied around him because he was the best taxidermist in the entirety of Edinburgh. And that's, I think, what universities are about. It's about students coming together and fighting for something that they believe is right. You've seen that in the anti-apartheid protests. You've seen that in the current protests around Palestine. Students use the skills that they learn at uni, their critical thinking skills, to change something. And I think that's the true purpose of the university, regardless of what the market says. And so that's why I don't think universities have lost their true purpose, because students make it, and students will continue to make it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ash. If I could ask again if anyone would like to make a floor speech for the proposition. Okay, there's a hand there.
This is more so direct.
Sorry, if you could say your name and your
Douglas, I'm a first year. I'm from Philadelphia. I'm an international student. And I have really only one point to make. I know we're having sort of the almost spiritual arguments about what a university should be and what it should provide people. But ignoring that for 1 second, if you want to attract people to a university, whether it be international students or English students, it doesn't seem like a good way to do that is to essentially cut the quality of the teaching by the contact hours and getting rid of the staff who make the university what it is. I have a very good archaeology professor who runs an archaeology lab, helping PhD students just sort through the dirt that they need to investigate, and that contributes to research. She can't do that anymore because she's swamped with work. And I don't see how, essentially, if you lean into what the purpose of the university is, which is as a place of learning, and as a place of nurture learning, if you lean into that, the market will help you. People will come to that university to get a good experience, but if you don't, they won't.
Now, if I could ask again for a floor speech for the opposition. In favor? Yep, right on there.
It's less of a speech, more really a request to the proposition that favours the opposition in this case. For universities to have lost their true purpose, they would have had to have left their true purpose for something else, right? That's not really the matter of debate, that's just a fact. And so far, the proposition, the only way they're saying universities lost their true purpose has been that they've lost their true purpose for a profit purpose, for the money, for the bottom line. Which I think is very unconvincing, given that, of course, there are only 3 unis in the UK that are for profit. Thus, I think if the proposition is going to convince me, like I said, I'm undecided. If they're going to provide a convincing argument, they've got to provide a new purpose that is not related to profit, which is frankly not a purpose at all, and it's not a motivation at all.
So thank you, that concludes the floor speech section. We will have a Q&A section later, so if you're not having a chance to speak yet, hopefully you will. So I would now like to introduce the third speaker for the proposition, Dr. Christopher O'Donnell, who in March 2025 was elected president of UCU Scotland. He is also the associate vice principal, I believe, of the University of Western Scotland and has been a union activist at branch, regional and national levels for over 20 years. Chris, the floor is yours. You have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. President, and House, thank you for the wonderful invitation to speak on this important occasion. I have a confession to make. In that confession, I have had to rip up nearly everything I'm about to say because of the quality of the debate that's happened in front of me. So for most of it, I'll be winging it. In response to something Sir Peter closed with, or as he asked me to call him, Big Pete, the idea around the marking and assessment boycott where you lost your own purpose, perhaps ask the person behind you who engaged in meaningful and constructive agreement and negotiation around the marking and assessment boycott, and all of the students at his university graduated without disruption. Perhaps take a tip. So, in taking a moment to give you that confession, what I hope I've done is made you curious. Are you curious that I've lost my bottle and I don't have the arguments to come back in favour of all of the wonderful things that have been said across the floor? Or have I piqued that curiosity to know more about what it is that I wish to say? Curiosity is held at the centre of my argument about the purpose of a university. So I'll start with a story. At our Union Congress last Friday, which was held on a campus that shares a hospital facility, I had the happenstance to bump into 2 people. The first one is a PhD student from Palestine who's studying at Dundee University. He spoke to me not about the escape of the terrors and the horrors in his homeland, but to come to Scotland to get a first-class education and take that back to the land that he lives in to do social good in that community. In fact, in a university that's currently housed in a tent. The second person we happened to bump into on that evening was the family of someone who was visiting a loved one at that hospital facility who'd recently had a heart transplant. Amanda, if my memory serves me well, spoke of the hope given to her and her family of the miracle of modern medicine. That miracle of modern medicine was created in a university hospital and its research centres. I'm certain my opponents tonight, and the ones that follow, can talk to chapter and verse about measuring a university by things like GVA, EBITDAs, MSIs, KPIs, but I'm arguing that a university is a more complex ecosystem. It serves the communities it impacts, and not everything that can be counted counts, and not everything that counts can be counted. The infiltration of business tools into our ecosystem is killing our habitat, and the flora and fauna of social capital is rapidly becoming extinct. Universities give away their identity as they have deviated from their purposes, their missions, into the commodification of their outputs, leading to amnesia on the purpose that dates back decades. Confession number 2, House. I've been invited to speak tonight because I represent those who work in the sector, those who see it as their calling, a passion, a duty to the subject that they love and the people that love it with equal ferocity. However, my own career universities have afforded me success. I'm a double national award-winning educator. The combinations of the awards that I have are held by less than 0.1% of the UK academic population. As the President has said, I am an Associate Vice Principal, and thus I have a unique lens. I am someone who deploys staff to provide an excellence in learning and teaching, models good student experiences using tools like the NSS, the Student Experience Questionnaire, yet I know that within a classroom, lecture theatres, labs, ideation stations and the like, the interaction between the educator and the classroom becomes a moment of knowledge creation. It counts, but cannot be counted. House, clearly it's happening to you as you are here today debating the hardest of questions, demanding that you and the power that you hold shape your university. The moment you became a curious mind is the moment when a truly excellent student experience happened. Our leaders, in interacting with those whom they believe shape our landscape, from politicians to businesses, have lost sight of the opportunity to self-define. And they have done damage to our collective psyche by allowing ourselves to be defined by others. The market economy is polluting our ecosystem. This is not a new problem. Let me turn to the words of a geophysicist Teviot, who won a Nobel laureate. And I quote, "There is a growing conviction among many of my friends in academic circles that university today is no place for a scholar in science. A professor's life nowadays is a rat race of busyness and activity, managing contracts and projects, guiding teams of assistants, bossing crews of technicians, making numerous trips, sitting on committees for government agencies, and engaging in other distractions necessary to keep the whole frenetic system alive." That quote is 66 years old, and yet those warnings have not been heeded. This race persists. In 2025, a university not far from here in its mission said, "Create, share, curate knowledge as a world-leading research-intensive university." Know thyself comes to mind. Let us turn to another curious mind that allows us to know ourselves. Another Nobel laureate, Yoshiri Oshami, apologies to anyone who is Japanese, said, "Truly original discoveries in science are triggered by unproductive and unforeseen small findings." Let us turn to another Nobel laureate, Tu Yu, who, through her passion for her field, her culture and commitment to learning, through incremental failure, found that during her deep dives into the literature of ancient Chinese traditional medicine, combined with her scientific skill, lay a cure for malaria. In a similar way, Laureate Geim built in his own time Curiosity Fridays. In those curiosities, he developed things like adhesive tape inspired by gecko's feet, and he found ways to levitate frogs using supermagnets. One Friday, they created graphene. It's a material 100,000 times thinner than hair, 200,000 times stronger than steel. It's in your smartphone, it's in that camera, it's in your watch, it's in skis, it's in tennis rackets. It holds up the concrete in skyscrapers. The list is vast. So, time abiding, my last confession. I trained as a forensic psychologist. Yes, we can read minds, and that was a very rude thought, sir. Under the tutelage of Professor Dame Vicky Bruce, she taught me that we are making safer societies by helping police forces to solve the most horrific crimes. I've continued in that field as a pleasure throughout my career, and we've helped police forces find young and vulnerable disappeared people all over the world. The greatest joy that we have is hearing of families who find closure and justice for a long-lost loved one. I know that that counts, but that cannot be counted. These award-winning researchers, and me, show that there are affordances by creative, passionate and committed academics who are called to be curious. They are a testament that universities should be about risk, creativity, curiosity and learning through failure. These stand in bold opposition to a marketised business economy. But you forget business, Chris. Thank you. Bill Gore built in time to his company's practices something called dabble time. That was time for you to sit aside and curate your ideas. They patented Gore-Tex. It goes back centuries. So, House, I implore you to focus your curiosity on the argument that, to our detriment, universities have handed their image, their definition, their self-confidence to a market. The consequence is that our culture has driven out embracing of risk and failure, supplanting it with the enthrallment of metrics that lack face validity, content and construct validity, an obsession with rankings based on those shoddy metrics. We no longer see the ways in which we impact and the ways in which we can do things that count but can't be counted. An inspiration of mine is famous for saying, "We are a monument, not a movement." Modern universities becoming monuments of decay is not rising anew, as Natalie spoke to us about. We must pivot back to that. Universities must adapt. In adapting, knowing ourselves, we thrive by committing to ensuring that our ecosystem delivers social good for our culture. Shift away from a rat race mentality, and as one former chancellor of a university said, the rat race is for rats. We are human beings, and university is one of the bastions of humanity. The decoupling from its humanity, the university has forgotten its true purpose.
We are privileged to now welcome the third speaker for the opposition, Lord Chris Smith. Lord Smith is a Labour Life peer, scholar, and as of July 2025, the Chancellor of the University of Cambridge, indeed one of the oldest universities in the UK and the world. Previously, he served as an MP for Islington South and Finsbury from 1983 to 2005, and as Secretary of State for Culture. Lord Smith, you have 10 minutes. The floor is yours.
Mr. President, thank you for that introduction. It is an enormous amount better than an introduction I had last week when I was sitting at a livery company dinner in the City of London, and the Toastmaster, dressed up like a playing card, banged his gavel on the table, and he was supposed to say, "Pray silence for the Right Honourable the Lord Smith of Finsbury." What he actually said was, "Pray for the silence of the Right Honourable Smith of Finsbury." It is, I have to say, good to be back in the city that I grew up in. Let's, however, in addressing this motion, slay a few dragons first. First of all, the proposition have made a lot about the fact that they claim universities are concentrating only on the bottom line. I'm really glad universities are concentrating on the bottom line, because that's how they fund libraries and laboratories and staff and academics and all the support staff that they have to employ. It is only if the concentration on the bottom line destroys the university as a place that nurtures and teaches learning and knowledge and discovery. It's only if that happens that the proposition have an argument, and I do not believe in universities up and down the country that is the problem that we face. Other dragons to slay. Yes, of course.
Would you not say that the massive staff that's happening in universities like Edinburgh are evidence that the online state is the way of education?
I don't think that I am distressed by the fact that there are some staff reductions happening in some universities, but I don't think that means, I have to say, that universities have entirely lost their reason for being and their purpose. The one or two other dragons to slay. Not all universities did right by their students during the COVID period. The student experience for far too many students was below par during that period, and universities should have been much more imaginative about how they responded. The third dragon I want to address is that the target of 50% of the age cohort going to university, which was dreamed up by the Blair government, of which I was, I have to confess, a part, was a pretty arbitrary target. We needed to do better than the 10% that went to university when I was a student, but not everyone is appropriate for an academic education. And we ought to be smarter at thinking about how universities address the needs of that age group of the population. Yeah.
I'm interested what kind of people are suited for the higher academics and who are not, and what differentiates the two.
I can't give you an immediate definition, but there are undoubtedly some people who really blossom and flourish in studying history or chemical engineering or classics or whatever. There are other people who really flourish in a more vocational educational setting, and we need to get smarter at distinguishing between the two. I do, however, want to make two fundamental points about what a university is for. First, we live in an age of misinformation and fake news. Universities have to be, and I would argue are, at the forefront of the battle against this tidal wave of misleadingness. It is no accident that for autocrats around the world, the first target they try and destroy is education. Dictators do not want their populations thinking for themselves. And universities are places of inquiry, debate, discovery and of contested ideas, and still are. Universities are not in the business of teaching you what to think, but in the business of teaching you how to think. That is why academic freedom and freedom of speech are so important. It is why I will always oppose the removal of platforms from people you don't agree with. We need to get better at listening to people we don't agree with and then arguing with them. I profoundly disagree with virtually everything that Kathleen Stock has to say, but I will defend her right to say it vehemently. Both the listening and the arguing are fundamentally important, and particularly important to universities. And I do not believe that universities have lost that tenet as yet. Yes.
Thank you for taking the point of order. If there is such diversity of opinion, how do you explain that all of the major economic faculties at major universities around these islands are dominated by neoclassical economics, and there are no heterodox economists, Kate Raworth, post-growth economics, Steve Keen, none of them can find a place at a major university economics department?
It is precisely because it is up to universities and academics to make those decisions that I or you should not be making those decisions. And remember, you are addressing this point to someone from the university that gave the world John Maynard Keynes.
20 years ago.
Academic freedom is not about governments determining who should be teaching at universities. It is about universities making those decisions for themselves. And that's the fundamental point which your question fails to recognize. I must make progress. I have 1 and a bit minutes left. The second fundamental point I want to make is that there are many students looking at, in England and Wales, looking at the level of debt that they're going to acquire, looking at employability doubts, looking at the way AI is taking over all sorts of routine employment opportunities. They are asking, what is the point of going to a university? But universities are not just about the acquisition of knowledge and learning. They are surely about the development of the whole person. They are about stretching minds and expectations. They're about looking beyond the horizon. They're about knowing how to become the best you can possibly be. They are about discovering your humanity. They are about preparing to make a difference to the world. Michelangelo once said, "The danger is not that our aim is too high and we miss it. It is that it is too low and we succeed." That is what ultimately universities are for, and that's what the best universities, like Edinburgh, like Cambridge, still successfully do. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Lord Smith. We will now move to our Q&A section. Lucy will again be going around with the microphone, and we will do it by raised hands also. Can I say again, if you are selected, please to say your name, your degree, and also if you are addressing the question to the proposition or to the opposition. So I saw a hand go up straight there.
Hi, my name is Ava, and I'm a second student in philosophy and English literature. I am originally from the United States, which is of course home to many world-class universities. And my former classmates there often complain about how many contact hours they have and how much work they have, which is honestly completely unfathomable to me, and I have to laugh going to university here. To me, fewer contact hours and fewer resources to be able to grade work limit the abilities of students to express and develop themselves and create a population of young adults which are less confident and capable than they rightfully should be leaving university. Of course, United States universities come at a large price. Had I attended an Ivy League or another institution of the kind, that would have been $70,000 to $100,000 a year. Is the solution simply to raise the price of university here, or if, as the opposition proposed, is it to lobby the government? And if so, why have we not been given a clear action plan as to how to do this? Thank
I and people like me lobby governments with every waking hour. I mean, it is true that I regard myself as a public servant. I work in a system whose rules are not designed by me, and I do my best, as my colleagues do, to try and make the system work to the benefit of students and staff. Now, people may disagree with the choices we make, but that's the mission. And so, yes, I think the answer is to lobby governments. It's complicated in Scotland because there are 3 different categories of students. I should have mentioned this earlier on, but you all know this. You could have 3 students studying the same course. One could be from Scotland and would not be paying tuition fees, one would be from England and be paying $9,500, and one would be from the United States or somewhere else paying much more. They study the same course, and so that's an inequity. Now, I don't design that system, I don't like it. The number of international students that we take does not affect the number of Scottish students we take. There is a misconception that says someone like me would rather have an international student than a Scottish student because I get paid more money. It's not true. The number of Scottish students that I have to take, or we have to take, is set for us by the Scottish Government, and we get penalised if we either take under that number or above that number. So the Scottish numbers are set by the government. If you want to change that, or you want to change their funding, lobby the government. I have to operate within that system. For international students, the prices that we set are, as you rightly say, cheaper than they are in some comparable systems. That doesn't mean to say they're cheap. It's cheaper than the United States, for sure, but actually it's more than a Scottish student or an English student would pay for the same course. So I agree that's inequitable. So there are inequities, but although I try to lobby those, and other people like me do, try to lobby the government to change those things, as things currently stand, that's the system we have to operate within, and we're doing our best to make it work for all students, irrespective of where they come from.
Ava is entirely right. The less contact hours we have, the less we can form our minds, and the less, as Chancellor Smith said, the less that universities are able to give us the opportunities to think for ourselves without support. And although governments are not supporting universities as much as they could, universities have forgotten their true purpose because they are in this financial situation, and despite being in this financial situation, they are letting their academic communities down by preferring to invest in infrastructure and buildings over their staff. If the staff, as we have heard from all across the opposition today. If the staff are truly the home of the universities, if contact hours truly are the most important thing to this university, and there is an argument for that, then cutting down staff, cutting back on staff costs and cutting back on the number of staff mean that those contact hours will be less valuable because more students will be stretched across fewer teachers. We will also have less ability for feedback to be taking place. I went to a picket line today and I spoke to members of the UCU in Edinburgh, and they said that it is not only that they are losing their jobs, but the support staff that allow them to get feedback back to us as soon as possible, they have their jobs potentially being cut, and they also are going to affect the ability for us to learn properly and get feedback enough. So yes, definitely lobby the government. The government does need to step up, but universities also need to take accountability for protecting their academic staff.
Sorry, Lucy. So if you could say name for the proposition or the opposition, is your question directed to?
Hello, I'm Rory. I'm a third-year international relations student at the University of Edinburgh, and this question is for the opposition. So I'm a Scottish student here, and the truth is, I would say, that life at Edinburgh can be very difficult because my peers have been discriminated against for their accents. We're frankly scapegoated as the causers of a tuition of a fee crisis. Even though universities in England are suffering the same problems when they charge fees. We also have to deal with courses that disadvantage us by not aligning with national fives and hires. And as a result, this leaves students like myself to feel much more isolated and disadvantaged. So I will ask the opposition, if students like me are going through these experiences, which is undeniable, it's been reported in the news, research has been published about it, we all know what's going on. How could you possibly say that we are enjoying the true purpose of the university by having access to these equal opportunities? Because we simply don't. Thank you.
I'd planned on not answering any of these. Because if we're being frank, yeah, I know. If we're being frank, we're not here to listen to students speak necessarily. But sorry. So that was wrong. Okay, sorry, no, I take it back. I know, I retract that statement. But I'm a Scottish student too. You know, I did Nat 5s, I did my hires, and there is truth to the fact that this university is not always super hospitable to Scottish students. To your point about hires, it's true. Had I known economics was a real subject, I wouldn't have taken maths. But you're right, and these provisions aren't in place. That being said, when we return to the point of the argument, although it is true that there are shortcomings for Scottish students, as there are shortcomings for international students, and as it is true that there are shortcomings for students from England and Ireland, it is not necessarily the case that universities en masse across the board are abandoning their principles, not just to their students, but to broader society. Thank you.
Just there, so. And if I could ask if you could just get to the question, just so we can squeeze in another one. Thank you.
Just there, Lucy, sorry.
Keep your hand up until Lucy comes.
Thank you. My name is Sam. I'm a second-year history student at the University of Edinburgh. One of the opposition speakers said that certain people are more suited for universities than others. How do they propose that we ensure that these people who are more suited in an era of ever-increasing tuition fees and associated costs don't actually become a cohort of people who are in reality just more able to pay?
I think this question was directed at me. The answer is that under no circumstances should higher education or vocational post-school education ever be a matter of who can afford to pay. It is how the wretched student loan system in England and Wales is supposed to operate. It doesn't. It is a completely broken system. It is how the decision that successive Scottish governments have taken to remove all fees from Scottish students going to university in Scotland have no hindrance in terms of fees in going to a university in Scotland. All of that is supposed to level the playing field for students not having to worry about ability to pay. But, and it's a big but, the assumption that that half of your age group should be thinking of university as the place for them, that assumption, I think, is questionable. I don't know where the answer is, but I don't think the people who put the 50% target in place knew where the answer was. They simply plucked it out of the air. I sort of know because I was working with them at the time.
I'd like to make two very brief points. One, it's not been clear, you said the 50% was plucked out of the air, what you think the figure should be now, but the figure in South Korea is about 80%, 80. It's an incredibly complex, difficult world, and a world of fake news, and people need this chance and the skills. Everybody needs the chance to get those skills, to get those knowledge, to have the chance to have the university life. And I want to address the question here because Sir Peter spoke about, well, in all those non-contact hours, there's lots of other advantages you can get from university life. But of course, that depends about whether you are having to do paid work just to be able to survive here at the university. And that's a deeply unequal situation, which is meaning even those who make it to university have a deeply unequal experience here because of their socio-economic background.
Pushing my luck with the President, two brief points. On accent bias, I was teased for my Cornish accent when I went to medical school in London, so I sympathise and I don't approve of that happening, and if it's happening, we need to root it out. So I absolutely agree, accent bias is unacceptable. On the topic of 80% of students going to university, how would you pay for it?
Very briefly. Very briefly, progressive taxation. Education is a public good. The cost should be met by the public that benefits, not being a huge weight sitting on individual shoulders for most of their lifetime.
So please lower your hand if it was a question for you. Wow. There's one down there at the very, very corner, I think. Will you something? You just, yeah. There, one of you. If you could stand, please. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sejal. I'm the Vice President of Welfare of the Students Association this year. My question for the proposition is,
You mentioned earlier around the purpose and definition of the purpose of the university being to seek truth. Is it, do you think, to seek truth or to seek truth at whatever cost? Because we've seen throughout the years of the university existing, especially one as ancient as Edinburgh, that cost can come to people across the world through the climate, through their indigenous rights, through their bodies, through the research that comes at their cost, and now currently at cost to the students and staff that are here. So is it to seek truth or to seek truth at whatever cost?
That is an incredibly deep and an incredibly important question, and one which I am certainly not qualified to answer. And I also think that in the context of this debate, the universities should seek truth. And I don't want to get into quibbling about costs and things because I think that's kind of circumstantial, but I do not think that universities should seek truth at all costs if it is going to cause human suffering. And I think that that's one thing that we can almost certainly all agree on.
And I would simply add, a university is in the business of seeking truth with humanity, because that is not truth at all costs. It is truth in the right way, in the right purpose, in the right frame, and it benefits people.
Thank you so much for that. We are now going to move to our summation speeches, so if I can ask the student speaker for the proposition to please go. No.
That's all right.
The final student speaker for the proposition to give a short speech to someone.
It's all right. I'm so excited to get up and speak to you all again. I hope you're all as excited to see me. I wish now that in the first half of my speech I had properly and more clearly defined what I meant by universities have lost, have forgotten their true purpose. A university's true purpose, as we have heard from both sides, is to support an academic community in the search, and I think this is actually a fantastic way of looking at it, in the search of humanitarian truth. Unfortunately, across universities in the UK, those academic communities are under threat because the universities have forgotten or perhaps have undervalued the impact that their staff have in comparison to the bottom line. Lord Chris Smith, you said that there was only a few universities that are having a few job cuts. That is not true. In Manchester alone, 234 members of staff have been cut. In Sheffield, 412 jobs have been cut over the last 3 years. And in Cambridge itself, 413 redundancies occurred last year. In Edinburgh, the UCU, as I said earlier, suspects that 1,800 members of staff are going to be cut. And the overall UCU suggests that 10,000 jobs may be lost over the entire sector. These job losses are not just about preserving the universities or fiscal management. They are an active choice, in the same way that the governments make an active choice about whether to support certain students and certain tuition fees. Because despite the fact that we're in these crises, despite the fact that there is a funding crisis, the university does continue to spend money on infrastructure over staff. It continues to increase wages for senior level management. I'm not saying that we shouldn't pay them anything, but they are paid huge amounts of money. If the university is entirely dedicated, as our principal said in a student newspaper interview earlier this year, if they are dedicated on increasing the student experience, which currently at the University of Edinburgh is 128 out of 130 universities according to the QS rankings, if he is genuinely true and genuinely wanting to improve the university experience, improve our ability to learn and our ability to seek humane truth, then the academic communities that are at the heart of universities need to be prioritised more than buildings. We need homes for our universities. We need them to be populated by academics, and we need them to be taking part in these discussions. Unfortunately, when we start kicking members of staff out to build the walls up around them, we are going to end up potentially with empty buildings and very few ideas. Universities need to remember that it is their staff and looking after their staff. That is their true purpose, and they are forgetting it.
Thank you, sir. Alan, if you please give your submissions,
Should have worked on my handwriting before this. Just as a quick summary of the opposition, we began with the definitions of university and indeed the definitions of the proposition. And to me, this is the crux of the argument. But granted, it's not the crux to everyone, and to some of you that might not be enough. We then talked about the inhospitable environment for universities societally. By focusing on the internal operation of universities, we fail to confront these external factors. Now, in one sense, these debates are very easy. You choose your definitions at the beginning, and if you're the proposition, you critique universities, and if you're the opposition, you do the opposite. I don't have those same restrictions necessarily. I'm allowed to defend universities, and granted that Peter doesn't have me expelled, I can critique universities as well. Universities are flawed. Universities do let us down. They let society down, sometimes to a seismic degree. Does this mean that they have forgotten their purposes? Does this mean that their contributions to civic society, to education, to science, to the arts, does this mean that they are purposeless? I'd argue that they're not purposeless, and I hope you agree. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alan. Just a few small things to get through before we can go, and we'll be in the pub before you know. So here at the Edinburgh Union, we vote with our feet. So as you leave those main doors there will be a further door on your left and one on your right. If you wish to cast a vote in favour of the opposition, we ask that you please leave through the left door into the yellow turret. If you wish to cast a vote for the proposition, we ask that you leave on the right door past that into the red turret. Now, as Lucy said at the beginning, there are so many people to thank for what the union has become. From the security tonight, from the staff at Teviot, to our committees, and of course our lovely guest speakers. Thank you so much for joining us. It has been a privilege. But I think there are three people, as Lucy said, who are deserving of specific mention, and that is Finn Tyson, Finlay McDonald, and Lucy Ferrer, our outgoing executive committee. So if I could please ask you all for one big round of applause for them. And without you coming to our debates, asking intelligent questions, engaging and showing interest, well, none of us would be here. We will, after this, be heading to the library bar, as the loft bar is now closed downstairs, where I hope you will join us to get a drink, discuss the debates, and to hear the voting results. And finally, thank you for bearing with me. It's my first time. I will get better. Thank you so much, and I call this debate to a close.